In 1571, the Talokanil are threatened by hunger, war, and disease. They turn to a god who gives their shaman a vision of a flower able to save them. Namor is the firstborn child since they drink the plant, so obviously he's the king, and his mom receives a bracelet conveniently made from this plant as a gift. Namor's mom doesn't want to drink the plant, so she drinks it anyway. They all drink it at the same time without testing it, and when they wake up they are all dying because they can't breathe anymore. Of course, the first thing people do when they can't breathe is to jump into the ocean to breathe because it just makes sense, so that's what they do. Namor is born, but he has wings on his ankles, also he has pointy ears, also he can live for at least 1,000 years, also he's not blue, and oh yeah, he can breathe in the water and outside too. He's completely different from his people and his powers are random abilities that have nothing in common, so let's call him a mutant. Decades later, his mother dies of old age, which is a bit underwhelming, but not really, because she dies with a broken heart, mourning the life on land that she once knew, so that's tragic. But it turns out they already had masks back then, and even though she couldn't live on land anymore, she wasn't completely trapped in the ocean forever, so it's really not that tragic. Namor wants to bury his mom at a specific place, but there's a slave camp. Namor and his people kill the slave owners, bury the mother, and leave. They don't try to kill more colonists responsible for their downfall and for how underwhelmingly tragic the death of Namor's mother is. Instead, they wait for 500 years because fighting people with nukes is just more fun than fighting people with cannons. Also, Namor meets an old guy who calls him a child without love because he doesn't know him whatsoever, and his mother loved him very much, so it's very fitting. Namor takes his name from there because he has no love for the surface world. There's clearly a connection between a child without love and having no love for the surface world. It's just brilliant. Why am I spending so much time on this silly story? Because Shuri and the viewers must understand why Namor has to kill the scientist, and he has to give the bracelet of his mom to Shuri that he kept for 500 years. It just makes sense. He had a mother, he was born, and an old guy called him Namor. Does anyone need more valid reasons to kill a 19-year-old woman? He convinced me. Namor's origin story sums up the whole issue with the movie. It's trying to tackle serious ideas but failed miserably at every attempt. I don't know who is responsible for this because Disney Marvel movies are made by a committee, so I'll blame everything on the writers to make it simple. Over 6 minutes of the movie is spent on this origin story but is nowhere near as effective as it should be. The writers have the ability to dump expository dialogue in the middle of the movie, which is by far the easiest way to feed information to the viewers, and they manage to make it completely useless. According to Namor, the whole point of this story is to explain why he wants to protect his kingdom. This is silly. He explained why they live in the water and why they're blue, but nothing in this story was more convincing than simply saying, "It's my kingdom, I'll do anything to protect my people." The origin story is also very unconvincing from the viewer's perspective. A god told them to find a plant, they drink it, and now, unlike the Black Panther, they turn blue and can't breathe. They go in the water and live in peace for 500 years, and now it's time to kill everyone. I mean, it's a bit much. Spider-Man's origin story is dumb, but it's easy to accept. A spider bites Peter. He gets spider-like abilities. The end. The mother of Namor drank a flower that gave him underwater powers, but also he turns out to be a mutant, so he has wings, pointy ears, can breathe outside of water, and by the way can live for 1,000 years. Holding a grudge for 500 years and wanting to kill a woman doesn't make Namor a sympathetic character. At this point it would have been more effective to let the viewers come up with a sad story in their own heads. The writers wasted over 6 minutes explaining something too silly to be believable, which doesn't even serve the plot or the world building in a significant way. Answering why fish people exist is not the most important question when the only thing the viewers know about the Talokanil is how much they hate humans. It would have been great to answer more fascinating questions about the Talokanil, like, what are they doing with vibranium? Did they care about the snap? Do they go out sometime to check on the humans? Do they care about humans polluting the oceans? How do they tame the whales? How come they can mind control people by singing? The mother was unhappy living under the sea. What about the others? Do they view it as a blessing or a curse? Now I'm being a bit unfair here. Maybe all these questions will be answered, because the 6 minutes flashback isn't the end of Namor's story. There's a 4-minute tour of the city. That's over 10 minutes of the movie on the Talokanil now. Can't wait to see how much I've learned about them at the end. First of all, it's hard to be blown away by this city and the music doesn't help. It looks extremely depressing. If you like the scene, that's great I suppose, but you can't deny it could have been done so much better. Again, this scene is nowhere near as effective as it should be. This scene could have been replaced by a monologue of Namor talking about his city with a smile on his face to let the viewers imagine what it would look like, but I guess dialogue is too boring. Entertainment value aside, this scene has the same problem as the previous one. Namor is doing this to convince her to kill the scientist. The movie has now wasted over 10 minutes on the same thing. It's the same conclusion that he came up with at the end of the origin story. Like the flashback, the viewers and Shuri don't need a tour of the city to understand why Namor wants to protect it. Every culture has things to protect and fight for. If Namor was trying to convince a racist CIA agent, it would at least make some sense, but explaining all this to Shuri, really? I'm pretty sure Wakanda can relate. The writers are incapable of conveying what they want because they are missing the point. You can show me New York City with your Apple stores and your tall buildings. That's impressive, sure, but I'm not going to kill someone because of it. And neither will Shuri. It's completely unrelated. How is it possible to spend so much time on a culture only to end up with so little results? It portrays an interesting people from Mesoamerica, but there's nothing to learn about them. Wakanda culture is pretty dumb between the elections, the spears, or the fact that all those flowers and suits are only for a single individual. But at least there's something. What I learned about the telecanil is that they have a cool hand gesture and they live underwater. In other words, nothing. It doesn't require any knowledge of Mesoamerica. Everybody can ride the telecanil. They have gods and they have spears. Wow, that's crazy. In isolation, this is not an issue, but for a movie that prides itself on showing people we've never seen on the big screen, it's pretty lame. To be fair, I learned about the god of the Yucatec people, but it's mostly because I went on Wikipedia. I find it amazing that the telecanil are based on the Mayas and it's only told once through a random line. I'm pretty sure if you ask people, they'll say Namor is either Maya, Aztec, Inca, or even Mexican. I guess it's more about having representation than purposeful diversity, which is a shame. They could have used any random civilization. They allegedly wrote 200 pages on Talocan. Where was it in the movie? What's great about old civilization is that we don't know a whole lot about them, so the writers are free to do almost anything. You could have had a conversation between Nakia and the old lady, where she tells her about people going missing, and she could say she isn't afraid of it because it's never Mayas who disappear. And then big revelation, Talocan has been capturing the descendants of the colonists for 500 years to use them as human sacrifice. Say every Sunday Namor goes to church and sacrifice one guy. That's more than 25,000 people over 5 centuries. Now that's a great villain. I realize it's a bit stereotypical and that's not how human sacrifice worked in Maya culture, but I'm spitballing here. The point is, there is a great story to be told somewhere with a very interesting culture and the writers did nothing. This movie should have been called Wakanda Forever featuring Wakanda. Namor's origin story is just one instance of the writer's inability to write a story. There's a lot of stupid exposition that doesn't really go anywhere and isn't well thought out. Let's introduce the daggers that Okoye doesn't like so Aneka can return them, only for Shuri to tell her to keep them and so she does. Wow, this was totally not worth the time. Let's take a minute to introduce the fly and it's useless. Let's have Valentina talk about her marriage for no reason. The writers are trying very hard to make a movie with meaningful scenes, but it's a complete failure. Wakanda Forever is just a bunch of movie clips playing one after the other. They wrote characters, stakes and storylines, but none of it fit together, as if the writers watched 5 different movies and tried to emulate what they saw. Let's look at some of the more serious plot points to see how silly they are. The storyline of Ross is too long and a waste of time. The only thing he does is giving the Wakandans the location of the scientist. He has a pointless conversation with the Queen on 2 separate occasions. Telling the Queen about the US wanting to blame Wakanda for the ship incident doesn't matter, she would have threatened Namor regardless. Ross is then arrested and says some stupid lines.
I have no unsanctioned contact with the Kingdom of Wakanda. The Wakandans saved my life. They're good people. You ever thought for a second what they could be doing? Ever thought what we would be doing if the US was the only country in the world with vibranium?
A shield, but never mind.
Val, please.
Wow, what a stupid and boring character. At least he has a bit of character growth because he's not a CIA agent anymore, but it could have been reduced down to 2 scenes. It makes no sense to arrest Ross at this stage. The Queen is dead, who cares? As long as he doesn't give too much intel to Wakanda, listening in on his conversation is more valuable. It might give Valentina what she needs to start a war. The plan to defeat Namor is moronic. They assume, let me say it again, they assume that Namor is getting oxygen from the water on his skin. They convert the ship into a drying machine and decide to fight Namor in the middle of the ocean for some reason. And then he gets out of the prison with a spear they completely forgot about. I don't know what to say. If the goal was to write two stupid characters, then the writers did a fantastic job. Wakanda spent 2 hours of the movie protecting Riri by losing hundreds of people and the Queen, but suddenly it's fine to let her go to the front line. She wants to fight because the Queen sacrificed her life for her, which isn't an argument at all. She is still a random 19 years old with a stupid Iron Man suit, and Namor is still a foe that even Wakanda can't handle. The tone of the scene is, I dare say, quite interesting as well.
If we could find a way to dry his ass out, he won't be as strong. Yo, that's it.
It sounds very serious for someone who lost her mother 2 seconds ago.
I just buried the last person who truly knew me. My heart was buried with her.
But yo, it is what it is. And the background music doesn't help either. It's like they went out of their way to make the movie less depressing, even though it shouldn't be. She seems to be doing pretty good for someone who is supposedly consumed by vengeance. The Queen's speech just exposes how dumb the plot is. T'Challa died of a random illness, Shuri went missing because she followed Okoye on an insanely dangerous mission for no reason whatsoever, and T'Chaka died of a terrorist attack outside of Wakanda. Her whole family is gone because the Blue Flower policy is dumb and because Shuri going to America is dumb. None of this has anything to do with being a powerful nation. Her exchange with Okoye is terrible as well. Her response about sacrifice is extremely bad.
Where is her treacherous husband now? But in a place where she can visit, if she wished. Mine! It's with the ancestors!
She's too emotional to be rational, which is fine, but it makes her sound petty and she dies before talking to Okoye again. Okoye is stripped of her rank, but Shuri gives her a new suit, so I guess she's a soldier again. Her arc is very fascinating. This emotional moment is based on stupidity from the world building, from the poor decisions of the Queen and Okoye to let Shuri go on a mission, and Namor for attacking the Wakandans on the bridge. The Queen yells about her family being gone, but in the next scene she asks the AI where Shuri is, which completely destroys the tone. Let me yell about how my family is gone to make the viewer cry and then I'll just ask the AI if she's alive. That's just great writing. Characters are allowed to make mistakes to a certain extent. Watching too many dumb people acting dumb turns the viewer's compassion into apathy. The conflict between Nakia and Shuri is so laughably non-existent most people probably haven't noticed it. It's established at the beginning of the movie that Shuri is upset with Nakia.
Nakia, daughter of Ya, is trying to reach you again. Maybe you should
continue your calculations.
They meet for the first time after 6 years in the cave and argue about saving someone's life. Shuri makes a comment about Nakia leaving Wakanda.
Thought you'd be back in Haiti by now.
To which she says,
I'm still Wakandan, you know.
And then the conflict is magically resolved.
If we survive this, I want you to know you have a home with me in Haiti.
They are holding hands less than a minute later and become best friends again. This is what I call garbage drama and a complete waste of time. It doesn't improve the movie in any way. Shuri is passive-aggressive while Nakia completely ignores it and doesn't even try to fix the situation. Oh wait, she does, to a completely different person. There's a conversation between Okoye and Nakia about this exact issue.
When you left without saying a word, it hurt. I regret not being there with all of you. I had to step away and let myself break.
Why is she saying this to Okoye and not to the one who is mad at her? The writers believe they've resolved the issue by explaining it to the viewers, but Shuri isn't watching the movie. At the end of the movie, Nakia wants to join Shuri to say her final goodbyes to T'Challa, but Shuri wants to do it alone. What? The writers established that Nakia and Shuri were both haunted by T'Challa's death, but only one of them is allowed to move on? Shuri should absolutely be alone in that scene, but denying access to the ritual to someone clearly in mourning only to roll the credits 30 seconds later is awful writing. Nakia should not have been there in the first place. Unless she wasn't actually haunted by the death of T'Challa and completely lied to Okoye's face. It turns out she was away to hide her child and she already mourned T'Challa's death.
Your Baba prepared us for his death, didn't he? But he didn't want us to go to the funeral. So we had our own ceremony for him here.
I regret not being there with all of you. I had to step away and let myself break.
What is this garbage? It's crazy how even the smallest details don't work. It demonstrates an insane amount of incompetence from the writers because it could have been easily fixed, or a complete lack of care from Disney for adding the scene at the end without thinking about how it would affect the movie. Exactly like Riri, who was injected in the story solely to tease the next phase, significantly hurting the plot. All these silly plot points are failed attempts by the writers to write storylines, but the most important one is probably the attitude of Namor towards Wakanda, which makes no sense and cripples a significant portion of the movie. Riri built a vibranium detector to show her teacher that she can. Why a vibranium detector? No one knows, but it's very convenient. The Talokanil want Wakanda to get Riri because Wakanda revealed vibranium to the world. The Talokanil attack Okoye, Shuri, and Riri on the bridge. The Talokanil capture the scientist and Shuri asks to come along. Namor tries to convince Shuri to kill a 19-year-old and to fight with him by telling her about his mom. The Wakandans threaten the Talokanil to reveal their existence to the world if they don't return the princess. Wakanda kills 2 Talokanil and rescue Shuri and Riri. The Talokanil attack the Wakandans and tell them to join the fight or die. There are so many unnecessary steps, it's insane. The attack on the bridge happened because Disney wanted a fight scene, or because the writers didn't know how to get Shuri and Namor together in a room to get 15 minutes of expository dump on why Namor is such a deep and tragic and cool character. Trouble is, it doesn't make any sense for Namor to attack them at this point because he's trying to make an alliance with Wakanda in the next scene. Either you force Wakanda to join you, or you pretend to be allies. Don't do both at the same time, you moron. The plot should have been, the Talokanil want Wakanda to get Riri because Wakanda revealed vibranium to the world. The Talokanil wait for Wakanda to contact them once they get the scientist. Namor is nice to Wakanda to convince them to kill the scientist and join the fight. This is where Shuri and Namor can meet and talk about their life for 15 minutes. If Wakanda doesn't want to kill the scientist, then destroy Wakanda. That's it. I've just removed 30 minutes of the movie without breaking the overarching story. Namor is now a villain with a brain who talks to people before throwing grenades. Ross can be sent to jail one way or another because he gave the location of the scientist. Okoye can still be general with the suit, no one cares. She can resign next movie if needed. Nakia could only appear at the end of the movie, or a new storyline can be made for her with the extra 30 minutes. I've even fixed the dumb speech with the Queen and the dumb conflict between Nakia and Shuri. Even the daggers would have to be handed back because Okoye is still general. I've just saved a third of your movie. I'm a genius like Riri. The world building for Talokan is almost non-existent, like every other country's, so at least it's consistent. Consistently bad, but consistent nonetheless. Why is Ramonda queen? Are you really telling me no one challenged a 60-year-old woman to become the leader of the most powerful nation on Earth? Or is it simply too inconvenient to admit that Black Panther's world building was trash and we should just ignore the fact that only great warriors can lead the country? M'Baku tests the strength of Shuri with an arm wrestle, he loses, and for some reason she's now in charge. Is it how emergency powers are voted? You arm wrestle with the power of the flower and now you're Queen Regent. It completely goes against the rules established in the first Black Panther. M'Baku should be appointed King Regent by the Council and Shuri Black Panther. I'd argue she shouldn't even be the Black Panther. How come she's allowed to wear the mantle of the protector of Wakanda? She synthesized a new flower, but it doesn't give the right to a scientist who scoffs at traditions to become the ancestral symbol of Wakanda. This movie loves to oppose her scientific beliefs with the religious beliefs of Wakanda.
Please allow me to heal my brother of this illness, and I will never question your existence again.
You must mourn her in accordance to the rituals of your ancestors. Do not bury yourself in your technology.
But he was there.
He wasn't there, Mother. The presence that you felt was just a construct of your mind.
The only time it's relevant would be here and the writers say nothing about it. Does the people of Wakanda mind having a heretic running the country? This question is way too interesting and complicated to be answered by these writers. Maybe the situation is too dire to follow traditions, which I find ironic coming from Wakanda, but sure. It could have been great for the council to say at least something, but the writers conveniently glossed over the whole thing. In the end, the Black Panther and the King are two different people like in Civil War, thank God. But please give the blue flower to M'Baku so that he doesn't die from an explosion because he's your king. The whole movie relies on the fact that they kept all the flowers in one room and that only one guy at a time is allowed to drink the flower. It was silly in Black Panther, and it's even sillier now because it's the reason why the US, France, and Namor are attacking them. I'm pretty sure the reason why Wakanda didn't share vibranium with the world is not that they don't want to, but that the writers don't know how to do it. They are unable to tell stories in a world that has vibranium in it because it requires to think about it, and thinking is hard. If it were up to me, the Wakandans would only have a small amount of vibranium that they can't share. Incorporating insane tech in the cinematic universe is simply too annoying, but more importantly it makes the world less relatable and turns some of the Avengers obsolete. Every hero could use a Black Panther suit, and all technologies from cars to phones would have to be changed. The issue with vibranium can be summed up with one word: escalation. If the average citizen has access to vibranium, then bigger threats are needed. If a gun wound can be stabilized with a bead, then bigger guns are needed. If governments have access to vibranium, then more advanced technology is needed to be a superhero. Every time something bad happens, the writers would have to make sure it can't be countered by vibranium. Seeing how the blip was handled, there's no way they would be able to build a coherent world with vibranium, so they shouldn't even try. Unfortunately, they clearly established that Wakanda could share vibranium, which makes me wonder, why didn't Wakanda help the world following the blip? It would have been the perfect time to open the country. T'Challa didn't keep his promise to end Wakanda's isolationist policy between Black Panther and Black Panther 2. He didn't have a lot of time, so instead are we to understand that his mother didn't learn anything from the first Black Panther movie.
Our future depended
You are wrong! All of you are wrong! To turn your backs on the rest of the world!
We let the fear of our discovery stop us from doing what is right. No more.
What happened to the Wakandan International Outreach Centers? They make it a point to say that Nakia only uses resources from Haiti, which means she's no longer leading the Wakandan International Outreach Center. This is very stupid and annoying. Wakanda can rebuild a country unfairly hindered by slavery in probably less than 10 years, and instead one of the best Wakandan agents with infinite resources is doing the same amount of good as someone volunteering at a soup kitchen. Let me give a brief recap of the history of Haiti. The natives are killed. Spain and France take the island. They bring slaves. The French Revolution happens. It's time for insurrection. Independence is earned at a huge cost. US occupation for 20 years. Over 100,000 deaths in an earthquake. Cholera introduced by the UN. 10,000 dead. President murdered in 2021. The country has issues on basically every levels because of a billion different factors. Meanwhile, Nakia is helping Haiti by going out of her way not to use Wakanda's resources. Oh, but she named her son after François-Dominique Toussaint Louverture, a key figure of the Haitian Revolution.
Toussaint is a beautiful name. It holds a great history.
I love when movies just take the name of famous people like it's supposed to be deep or mean anything. I took 2 hours to research Haiti's history, which I'm sure is more than the people who wrote this movie. My recap of the history of Haiti is not nuanced in any way, but my point is the country could use Wakanda's help, and this movie oversimplifies these issues. And that's what the movie does all the time, because the writers are not mature enough to understand how the world works. They put a message about French colonialism with the mercenaries, the French representative, and Haiti. I'd rather not tackle this serious issue in a dumb superhero movie, but if you really have to, then you must do it right. Unfortunately, their only comment is that France is bad and there's no arguments or valuable information given to illustrate their point of view. It's like they were afraid of offending French people. Or maybe, and that's the most likely explanation, they have no idea what to say about it, but since you've got to have a message, let's just say France bad and the world is now saved. France absolutely did some terrible things in Haiti and many other countries, but if you have nothing to add to the conversation, you should leave it to the grown-ups. Also, if you're making France the baddies, can you please take a French actress? She does a great job, but I can immediately tell she's not French.
C'est une menace directe à la sécurité mondiale de la non-prolifération.
I mean, she could be a French-American ambassador, but in that case she should be talking in English to make it easier for everyone in the room. This sentence doesn't even mean anything, so they fixed it in the dubbed version.
C'est une menace directe à la sécurité mondiale et à la non-prolifération.
It's a nitpick, but it shows that they fail even on a fundamental level. I guess it's to keep up with the theme. She's pretending to speak French, he's pretending to speak American, I'm pretending to speak English, he's pretending to speak English, they're pretending to speak English with an accent. It's all pretend. I also enjoy how they're making France look dumb with their stupid metal detectors instead of using valid arguments like medicine, science, and alien threats. Can vibranium help stop climate change? Can vibranium cure any disease besides the random illness of T'Challa? Can vibranium improve our facilities to reduce the cost of energy, healthcare, transportation, and drastically change the lives of billions of people? It would have been great to ask these questions instead. At the end of the first Black Panther, T'Challa said Wakanda would open its borders, but it didn't. Wakanda is making false promises. Wow, sounds like any Western country. France and the US demands are completely legitimate and they're framed as being two oppressors forcing Wakanda's hand. T'Challa's speech was over 6 years ago. I feel like the US is allowed to be disappointed in Wakanda's attitude. Using Wakanda to make a commentary on xenophobia when the same people have been living together for 50 generations with closed borders is the most hilarious thing I've ever seen.
It has always been our policy to never trade vibranium, not because of the dangerous potential of vibranium, but because of the dangerous potential of you.
Saying the dangerous potential of you is xenophobic, period. The Wakandans see themselves as superior and act like the Western world is too primitive to be civilized by Wakanda. What the writers fail to realize is that the danger of us comes from our fear of other countries. There is no need for the atom bomb when everybody lives under the same dome like Wakanda. One people, one culture with a small population that cannot be attacked by soft or hard power have the audacity to pretend to know better. Wakanda cannot be used to push this message not because the country doesn't exist, but because it can't exist. It's possible to make a political statement with a utopia or a work of fiction in general, but not like this. The frame of reference of Wakanda has nothing to do with ours. Racism can't exist. The only white person they got is called a colonizer, which doesn't make them look very tolerant. International conflicts can't exist. Multinationals can't exist. Invasions can't exist. Colonialism, no need with vibranium. None of our modern issues have been solved by Wakanda because they never had them. The Black Panther system is trash, prevents women to be leaders and allows psychopaths to rule the country. The democratic system of the Western world is not perfect, but it doesn't allow for a random guy to take the throne overnight in any legitimate way. The political commentary is written by children who have no knowledge of the world and who are unable to even comprehend what a comparison is. At no point is the Wakandan political system better than ours, and at no point would it be applicable to our world, so your whole commentary is ignorant garbage. Wakanda is like a gated community. Everything is perfect in it, and they don't want illegal aliens inside because they would disturb their beautiful neighborhood. Can't let the wrong kind of people in with their miserable lives. They're too dangerous. Wakanda is a joke. There's a great story somewhere about what it means to open up a country, but that's not what this movie is about.
You do not sneak into my country and tell me what is fair.
Sounds pretty bad to say this kind of thing, but it's not framed as being bad, so it's fine.
Our foremothers gave us this spear because it is precise, elegant, and deadly.
They are obsessed with their spears, but it's not guns, so it's fine.
The wise build bridges, while the foolish build barriers.
Building a wall is bad, but shields are fine. I find your lack of self-awareness lacking, Disney. This movie manages to have a political stance that makes no sense because the messages are too dumb and confusing to have any meaning. Wakanda is good and the world is bad. That's just great. A wise man once said,
"We must find a way to look after one another as if we were one single tribe."
I guess we're not one single tribe then. Nothing was learned from the first movie. Now let's talk about the big theme of the movie, grief. I hate talking about themes because it often rhymes with intellectual bullcrap. Everybody loves to talk about themes because they're easy to identify, or more exactly, they're easy to imagine, because if two scenes look similar, the writers had to be talking about a theme, right? Somehow, if you attach a theme to a stupid plot point, it makes the stupid plot point alright because it's part of something more complex, something too intelligent for mere mortals. I've seen a lot of people praising this movie for its portrayal of grief. Just because a movie has people sad in it doesn't make it about grief. This movie is not made by people who are able to use themes in any meaningful way. The grief in Wakanda Forever is really only portrayed by Shuri. There are small hints and dialogue about Nakia's and Ramonda's grief, but it's poorly executed between the post-credit scene making Nakia's exchange confusing and the Queen's speech where she yells about how dumb the plot is. There's only a single scene where the Queen talks about grief.
T'Challa is dead. But that doesn't mean he's gone. When that illness took your brother from us, I had to lead a wounded nation and a broken world.
So let's just say these two characters are not very good vehicles to convey the theme. There's a funeral scene at the beginning, but it's the funeral of the King and the Black Panther. One could argue it's showing a nation sad about the death of T'Challa, as much as I could argue the funeral is here because it's a formality and the movie doesn't care about the feelings of the people. My point is, it's what you do when someone dies, and a funeral doesn't make it automatically about grief. For these reasons, it's wrong to say the movie is about grief. It's about Shuri's grief. But is it good? The grief of T'Challa, Ramonda, and yes, Chadwick Boseman are mixed together into one big ball of rage called Shuri, which is extremely sloppy. The first part of Shuri's grief is the death of T'Challa. Her brother dies, she seeks revenge. If the Blue Flower could have saved T'Challa, then it's the fault of the dumb world building of Black Panther 1 with the Blue Flower room, and the fault of Shuri for not keeping a piece of the last flower. Obviously none of this is mentioned, so instead she blames Killmonger, but he's dead. It explains why she seeks revenge on the whole world and wants to burn it. This is actually relatable. It's a rational, irrational thought to have in such circumstances. The death of T'Challa brings her torment and she bottles it up. The writers did a pretty good job here if we completely forget about Black Panther 1, of course. Nothing too crazy, but it explains why she'll go insane later. Unfortunately, that's all we get, because the second part is something else. This is the part I like to call stealing someone else's homework when you're the idiot of the class who doesn't even know how to read. Shuri watches her mother die, she seeks revenge, she fights, she realizes that vengeance is bad. It's the arc of T'Challa in Civil War. T'Challa watches his father die, he seeks revenge, he fights, he realizes that vengeance is bad. Shuri stole 2 lines from T'Challa.
I'm not my brother. Namor will beg me for mercy as I stand and watch as he dies.
I am not my father. I'll kill him myself.
Vengeance has consumed us. We cannot let it consume our people.
Vengeance has consumed you. It's consuming them. I'm done letting it consume me.
There's even similarities with the visuals.
But if I could get them to kill each other...
The montage and the music are great, but there's one small problem. It doesn't mean anything. There's images of the people of Talokan and Wakanda to show that Shuri is letting go of her hatred to prevent eternal war. That's cute, but the one responsible for all this is Namor. If she wants peace between both countries, she has to do something about him because he's a psychopath, and so she decides to let him go? What? Shuri is an idiot and the montage is pointless. The deaths of the mothers are put together like it's supposed to have some kind of meaning. One was killed and the other died of old age. One was killed by Namor, the other was not killed by Shuri. And then in the middle of this, there's shots of Shuri mourning the death of T'Challa. What the hell is this? They've put everything in a blender and pressed the montage to make people cry button. They've mixed up everything and they act like it's the climax of the movie. And then it gets more annoying when you think about it, because they stole the Civil War lines, T'Challa's arc, and even the ending, but in the dumbest way possible. The vengeance has consumed us line doesn't work here. What makes the ending of Civil War so impactful is that Zemo won the war, but he didn't win anything over T'Challa. He had no quarrel with Wakanda. None of them are winning or losing the final confrontation because they are not enemies.
I'm sorry about your father. He seemed a good man, with a dutiful son.
T'Challa realized he was wrong through the dialogue in 2 scenes and from watching Tony and Steve rip each other apart. Namor and Shuri on the other hand are enemies. Namor killed hundreds of Wakandans and the Queen. He clearly targeted Wakanda. Shuri realized she was wrong because she saw her mother in a vision and remembered Namor's garbage origin story. The Vengeance Has Consumed Me arc is about a man coming to terms with the loss of his father by handing Zemo over to the CIA instead of killing him. The Vengeance Has Consumed Us arc is about a woman coming to terms with the loss of her mother by not handing Namor over to the CIA and by not killing him. T'Challa's choice makes sense and is relatable. Shuri's choice is moronic and not relatable. Namor is a goddamn psychopath who killed a lot of people and she just let him go. In the end they are forming an alliance. She went from a crazy person to someone so noble she doesn't make him accountable for anything. This is so dumb. The writers told T'Challa's arc without understanding what made it work and destroyed it. This movie is not about grief because Shuri's arc simply doesn't work. A movie that has valuable comments about grief by using its characters and its story is Civil War. The Lagos incident compelled the people to take action against the superheroes. The grief of this woman makes Tony consider signing the Sokovia Accord to regulate the activities of the superheroes. It creates a direct conflict with Steve, who has a different perspective.
We try to save as many people as we can. Sometimes that doesn't mean everybody. But if we can't find a way to live with that, next time, maybe nobody gets saved.
The tension inside the group rises.
But it's run by people with agendas, and agendas change. That's good. You chose to do that. If we sign this, we surrender our right to choose.
Steve's point of view becomes more irrational after the funeral.
Even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no, you move.
Bucky is now the last person from Steve's previous life. Meanwhile, Zemo seeks revenge for the death of his family. He waits for the perfect opportunity to strike. His plan involves mind-controlling the Winter Soldier to force Steve to pick a side. Zemo reveals that the Winter Soldier killed Tony's parents, turning Tony against Bucky and Steve.
It wasn't him, Tony.
I don't care. He killed my mom.
This irrational behavior stems from a past trauma.
To clear traumatic memories. It doesn't change the fact that they never made it to the airport, or all the things I did to avoid processing my grief.
Zemo wins.
An empire toppled by its enemies can rise again, but one which crumbles from within, that's dead forever.
That shield doesn't belong to you. You don't deserve it. My father made that shield.
There's so much to say I could make a 2-hour video out of it. Grief bleeds into the actions of the characters and feeds other themes and plot points. On top of that, there's T'Challa, Scarlet Witch, Sam, and many other characters who also experience different levels of grief. That's how you do themes, that's how you do mature themes, and that's how you write a story with grief in it. Let's end the video with a bit of comedy. There's a lot of jokes in the movie, but unfortunately they are written by minds unable to create humor. Remember this line in the first movie?
Don't scare me like that, colonizer.
Well, it's said 2 more times in Wakanda Forever.
When are we leaving so I can see my favorite colonizer?
The colonizer in chains.
You can't call someone who took a bullet for Nakia, then almost died for your country, and then fed you information to once again save your country, a colonizer. Why is Captain America not called a colonizer too? Shuri calling him a colonizer in the first movie was fine, I guess, because she didn't know him, and she called him by his name after that. It should have ended in the first movie, but the joke was allowed to endure. Do they not realize you can't make the same joke 3 times? That's not how comedy works. It's so stupid too.
The colonizer in chains. Now I have seen everything.
Wow, you mean you've never seen a prisoner? That's crazy. Being a chained prisoner and a chained slave is slightly different, but again the messaging in the movie is not well thought out, so let's just diminish actual slavery. It's not endearing to call someone a colonizer, and especially not coming from Okoye. Just stop. Call him a white boy if you really need to mention race. Joking about him being a token white guy would at least make it meta. Why is Ross here anyway?
Is that an iPhone I see?
Primitive.
How is this funny? Of course it's a smartphone, what else would it be? She's been outside of Wakanda before, she must know that already. The scene in the dorm room is so bad I'm conveniently going to skip over it.
Take me to the princess, or I will drive my spear so deep into your CPU you will not be able to process basic input for a millennia.
I don't get why she's so rude, but more importantly this joke is terrible. I'll hit you so hard on the head you won't be able to speak for 1,000 years. Wow, I'm dying of laughter over here.
The Black Panther is gone.
So y'all stop having Black Panthers when I get kidnapped?
What? Where is the joke, please? It's borderline disrespectful to T'Challa. All these jokes are forced humor. The characters are saying this for no other reason than to make the viewers laugh, but it's painfully unfunny. This movie is a school project made by children who see the world but are unable to offer anything other than a description of it. We introduce a new culture with cool flashbacks and a tour of the city, but we're not actually saying anything about it. We have different storylines with ambitious ideas, but none of them go anywhere. We know about colonialism, but we don't really have anything to add to the conversation besides it's bad. We understand what creates grief, but we don't know how to use it in a meaningful way. We enjoy laughing, but we don't know what makes a joke funny. The movie wants us to believe that these peaceful nations are so much better than us, but this whole plot makes them sound like idiots and they're never framed as such. I love how Wakanda Forever just ends because it's too hard to think of the consequences of the movie. Namor is still free and it will become an issue in Phase 5. They ended the story with the good guys learning not to kill people, but they forgot about the bad guy who didn't learn anything. He still wants to kill people. It would have been great to spend 10 minutes on what the bad guy wanted instead of his life story. Wakanda will have to take the blame for the ship incident. Valentina knows about the Talokanil, and then there's the son who pops at the end for some reason. Now I've said the movie is written by children. It does fit the profile because the writers lack the maturity, the language, the self-awareness, the knowledge, and the writing skills to make such an ambitious project. The truth is I'm not a fan of attacking people based on their age. Children is just a euphemism for an array of more colorful adjectives I can't put in the title.